Today, I want to talk about the customer engagement that I have most ambiguous feelings about. Truth to be told, I haven't delivered a full Wardley mapping workshop for them, just the introduction. But during this 1 hour activity, we've managed to build situational awareness and we've managed to find proper ways of dealing with the situation. Unfortunately, those findings didn't land. Now, you may say that my feelings have been hurt, and that's why I'm feeling ambiguous about the customer. But I encourage you to watch this video, build your own understanding of the situation, and do your own judgment. Does this customer have a special place in hell? That's an interesting question. First of all, let me introduce you to this potential customer. I'm saying potential because it wasn't a proper paying customer. Second of all, by now, you should know that I'm not going to reveal any customer-specific information, and that this case study had been anonymous. So, this customer was a small B2B organization operating in a very specific market. They were brought to life by a consortium of many large utility vendors who were competing with each other, and those utility vendors had to provide continuous services. In that market, there was an expectation that customers may change vendors and that the switch should be invisible to the consumer. They should just receive a new, possibly lower bill from another vendor of their choice. To cope with that responsibility, vendors have incorporated this small B2B organization, the customer, and delegated all of the responsibility for customer migration to this organization. As you can imagine, the organization faced many challenges, but two of them were outstanding. First of all, the regulator was unhappy. Consumers complained, so the regulator was investigating the situation. Second of all, perhaps what's more important is that the company suffered from high operational costs. The customer migration was far too expensive and took far too long to complete. Our potential customer said that they have tried lots of approaches, but they didn't work. Therefore, they wanted to give Wardley mapping a chance. In less than an hour, we've got results that have become a core pattern for me. This is the first pattern that I'm checking in every mapping engagement. However, the customer didn't like it. When we build a map, we traditionally start with identifying who are the most important stakeholders. In this instance, we started with consumers who needed or wanted to switch vendors. In order to satisfy that need, the organization had to create a migration process, and the migration process and systems depended on vendor systems, and there was lots of them, usually very old, because each vendor had their own solution that they have developed, and the organization had created an in and out processes for moving data out of vendor systems and into vendor systems, and those processes were specific for vendor systems. There was one more thing. When the migration didn't work, somebody had to do investigation and to find out exactly what didn't work out as planned and how to fix the situation to make the consumer happy. In that moment, somebody revealed a very important bit of information. For many years, customers either didn't care or weren't aware that it was possible to switch vendors. They expected the process to be slow and painful. But government, in order to increase competitiveness, actually mandated the process to be as seamless as possible. Consumers' expectations changed, and they were backed by legislation. So, what did the customer do? They have looked at their costs. They have figured out that the most expensive part of their operations is the investigation, because it requires going to many different vendors and checking what is really happening there. It requires building relationships and developing the understanding of how those vendor systems operate. And they wanted to industrialize it. They wanted to make this process more efficient, faster, etc., etc., etc. But there is a catch. There is always a catch, which is very visible on a map once you draw it. If you've got lots of custom systems, custom means that they are changing all the time as a whole because organizations are constantly tweaking them. That means that you, with your migration process and in and out processes, rely on something very unstable. Which means that even if you try to improve your investigation, the moment something changes in those systems, all of your efforts go bust. When you face a situation like that, with lots of dependencies in the custom space, you want to stabilize it as low in the system as possible. What you want to do is to look at the custom components which are closest to the source of your instability and move it to the right. Make it commoditized. Because of that commoditization, the number of investigation cases will go down because you've got much better at the migration in and out processes, and also because it will depend on rather standard and predictable processes, it will be much easier. But then there's a question. How do you standardize migration and those processes if your vendor systems are not going to change? The easiest way to do it is to introduce something which I would call a customer transfer API. And the trick is that this organization should be responsible only for handling customers through that customer transfer API. So whatever migration they were doing, their responsibility should end on this particular capability. And it should be the responsibility of each individual vendor to make sure that they can handle a rather standard transfer API. Then you are putting the responsibility for the stability of those systems where it really belongs. It's the responsibility of the vendor to provide required capabilities, and it's the responsibility of our customer to actually handle the migration through this capability. It shouldn't be very difficult to start talking to those vendors. They would all benefit from the customer transfer API, but for some reason, nobody in the organization we have worked with was willing to do that, and they have resorted back to their initial strategy, which was to find a way to make investigation better, which, as you can see from the map, is impossible. Patterns and lessons learned. In this session, a particularly useful pattern was effectiveness over efficiency. It means that if you face an efficiency challenge, you may want to look up and down in the value chain and check whether there are different ways of resolving your problem before tackling efficiency directly. It might be the case that changing different capability in your environment will remove your problem without any effort. Second, use standards. Standards are a very useful way of shielding you, or standards are a very useful way of protecting you from instability in your system. And standards are also a way to make sure that people are responsible for handling their uncertainty. If they don't want to modernize their systems and make them more predictable, that's fine, but the onus will be on them to provide standardized API. The third one is don't be the shield. The customer was tasked with a particular responsibility of making efficient customer migration, but received no power nor support necessary to accomplish this goal. They were basically a scapegoat and an excuse both for the broader public and for the regulator. And the last one, it's politics. If you are at the wrong end of the political stick, there is very little value in looking at this strategy, because there is no way in which you can significantly improve the situation, and the mistake was made long before, where you have accepted a bad deal. One of the big promises of Wardley mapping is the democratization of strategy. I, as a consultant, don't have a vote because I don't have a skin in the game. So in this case, when the customer is choosing a suboptimal solution, I still wonder whether that was a malicious intent or I could do something differently. What are your thoughts? Do you think that the customer has a place in hell? Do you think that there are stakeholders in this story who actually have their place in hell already? Do you think there are stakeholders in this story who actually have a place in hell ready for them? Do you think there are customers in this story who have already place in hell waiting for them? Do you think there are stakeholders in this story who have place in hell ready for them? Anyway, if you would like to make your own map, I have built a course which will help you get started. Check learn.wardleymaps.com. And thank you for watching my video.